know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk exposes the secret evidence packet William V. Morrison brought to Brushy Bill Roberts' failed pardon hearing as Billy the Kid. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Imposter Hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. The pardon hearing itself is in Talk 53, linked below. William V. Morrison, in trying to pass off imposter Oliver Brushy Bill Roberts as Billy the Kid, had something no con artist could manufacture: luck. By luck, he got New Mexico's Governor Thomas Jewett Mabry to grant Brushy a November 30th, 1950 hearing for possible pardon as Billy the Kid. Though Brushy failed his impersonation, by luck, 28 days later, he dropped dead, ending future flubs. And by luck, Governor Mabry and his historical experts, positive Brushy was an imposter, ignored Morrison's so-called evidence packet that he brought to the hearing. So, no one saw it was hogwash. That enabled Morrison to distract from Brushy's flop by wailing that his proof that Brushy was Billy had been hidden by the hearing. Thus, Morrison's never-seen evidence packet lived on with Brushy hoax dupes as a holy grail of lost truth. Right after Brushy Bill's December 27, 1950 death, Morrison swung into action, promoting his lucky evidence packet. For December 30th's Lubbock Morning Avalanche, Morrison was quoted for its article titled, "Brushy Bill Buried, but Legend That He Was Kid Lives On." It stated, Governor T.J. Mabry of New Mexico recently refused Roberts' plea for a pardon as Billy the Kid. Morrison said the governor did not properly examine documents backing up Brushy's claim. The January 5, 1950 Heiko News Review ran, "Notorious Character is Buried." Morrison, with stilted legalese of his lawyer impersonation, proclaimed, "The governor denied their appeal in spite of evidence consisting of a 17-page brief, a 2-page letter of testimonial from the law firm of Andrus, Lipscomb, and Pedicolis of El Paso, and 22 instruments containing what was presented as documentary proof of the contention that Brushy was, in fact, Billy the Kid." Morrison repeated that ploy for his August 8, 1952 Kiwanis Club talk in Silver City, titled, "He Said He Was Billy the Kid." He stated, Not one person in that hearing room asked to see any evidence or any records. Interestingly, this evidence packet is absent from C.L. Sonishen's collected papers, which have extensive copies of Morrison's Brushy Bill documents. Morrison, however, sent it to Billy the Kid historian Robert N. Mullen when courting him about Brushy as Billy, and it's in Mullen's collected papers at the Nita Stewart Haley Memorial Library in Midland, Texas. Morrison otherwise kept his evidence packet secret. It lived on with Dale L. Walker, C.L. Sonishen's adulating biographer, in his 1997 book, Legends and Lies, Great Mysteries of the American West. Duped by Sonishen, he backed Brushy under I'm Billy the Kid, the case of Brushy Bill Roberts. He exaggerated the evidence packet as, quote, 17 parcels of legal materials, transcriptions of his interviews, investigative findings, depositions, and several notarized statements from people who had known the Kid and testified that Roberts and the Kid were one and the same. Since Morrison thought Governor Mabry and his experts would review it, one is left baffled as to why he thought its meaningless hodgepodge would help. Possibly, Morrison had P.T. Barnum's hope. There's a sucker born every minute, and that quantity was convincing. In his pardon petition, through the Texas law firm, he'd written, "We are sure that the great amount of work and effort reflected by the enclosed file is readily apparent," with the information listed as verified statements, affidavits, letters, news articles, etc. The evidence packet was 2 sections about Billy the Kid, a statement of facts and instruments for reference. The 2-page letter of testimonial, which Morrison cited in the January 5, 1951, Heiko News Review's Notorious Characters Buried, was just his pardon petition from the law firm, so was actually seen by Governor Mabry. All the other documents have no connection to Brushy. Morrison had apparently bet on Brushy's act being so convincing that Billy's records would seem like his own. And Morrison missed their obvious risk. They looked like coaching sources, which they were. The statement of facts, at 21 type pages, is titled, In Re William H. Roberts alias William H. Bonney. Advertised ever after by Morrison as his clinching covered-up truths, it's just his mangled Billy the Kid history with filler of retyped Billy the Kid documents. Its errors wouldn't have been made by real Billy, and it has no intimate knowledge expected of a participant like him. It doesn't even have a punchline that it was Brushy's special knowledge. Tacked on is Morrison's fakery of no coroner's jury report, but without a punchline that Billy therefore survived as Brushy Bill. Summarized with commentary, it stated, William Henry Roberts, Brushy's made-up name, which he forgot in the hearing, alias Kid, alias William Henry Bonney, alias William H. Antrim, alias A.L. Roberts, who was born on December 31st, 1859, not Billy's birth date, but derived from Brushy's Social Security benefits frauds fake birthday of December 31st, 1868. Went to Lincoln County, New Mexico in the summer of 1877. He was employed by Frank McNabb, misspelled, foreman on the John S. Chisholm Ranch, where he worked for a short period of time. Note that Frank McNabb was a cattle detective and Billy never worked for Chisholm. From Chisholm's, he went to work on the Maxwell Ranch for the brother of Pete Maxwell. Note that Maxwell had no brother, nor did Billy work for the Maxwells, where he became acquainted with Mrs. Maxwell and her children. Note that Morrison seems unaware that Pete was her son. He stayed in the Ruidoso County, it was Lincoln County, during the winter of 1877, living with the Cowboys. In January of 1878, it was actually October of 1877, he was employed on a ranch on the Rio Feliz by the owner, John Tunstall. John Tunstall's murder is claimed as starting a, quote, cattle war between the two factions. The factions are called Murphys and McSweens because Morrison was unaware of the regulators or anti-Santa Fe ring freedom fight. Sheriff Brady's killing is at an adobe wall at the McSween store building when it was actually an ambush from behind an adobe wall at Tunstall's store's corral. Buckshot Roberts is killed by Constable Brewer's deputy Bowdry, misspelled. A 3-day battle, not called the Lincoln County War Battle, which was actually 6 days, occurs because Sheriff Pepin harassed the McSween faction who were in McSween's house and refused to surrender. On the third battle day, Fort Stanton Commander Colonel Dudley told McSween to stop fighting, but didn't tell the Murphy faction. So the Murphy men set fire to his house, and Dudley pointed, quote, his guns. It was a howitzer cannon and a Gatling machine gun at McSween men in other buildings and told them to leave. And according to testimony in Colonel Dudley's court-martial proceedings, it was actually an inquiry for possible court-martial, quote, 3 of the Negro soldiers were firing with the Murphy faction during the battle. Morrison later admitted that he never bought that Court of Inquiry's expensive transcript, so he missed Billy's testimony that the 3 shooting soldiers were white, but coached recorded Brushy, a racist, parroted that N-word soldiers had shot at them. Those killed and those escaped were named, which came from one transcript page Morrison did have. Then a United States commissioner named Angel, misspelled and unknown as an attorney sent by the Departments of Justice and Interior, blamed Governor S.B. Axtell for friendship with the Murphy faction. Note that the role of the Santa Fe ring is unknown. Lew Wallace replaces Axtell and issues an amnesty proclamation, but Billy the Kid didn't qualify because of past indictments. In 1879, the factions represented by Billy the Kid and James Dolan tried to make peace. It was actually just a personal peacemaking attempt. But right after, Dolan and his men murdered attorney Houston, misspelled, Chapman, Mrs. McSween's attorney. So the war started again. It didn't. And Wallace issued orders to General Hatch to apprehend the kid as accessory to the murder of Chapman. Wrong. Apprehension was for outlawry along with other outlaws. Billy's and Lew Wallace's pardon bargain letters are then quoted in full. Ignorant of the actual pardon bargain, but using Lew Wallace's Outlaw Myth articles as sources, Morrison wrote, quote, "The kid agreed with Governor Wallace to submit to arrest to Sheriff George Kimbrell, misspelled, to testify before the Lincoln County Grand Jury with reference to the killing of Chapman, to give statements on Lincoln County war in general, wrong, to plead to the indictments against him, wrong, to stand trial in district court in Lincoln County, New Mexico, wrong. The governor agreed to pardon him if convicted, wrong. The pardon was just in exchange for the Chapman testimony. Billy requested annulling the indictments to prevent trials." Billy testifies in the 1879 grand jury and gets indictments of Dolan, Campbell, and Evans. Billy's venue is changed to Doña Ana County, but Billy, wanting to be tried in Lincoln, felt betrayed and left the jail. Wrong. Being tried was not part of the bargain. Billy left his sham imprisonment in Juan Patron's house because no pardon came, and he was about to be transferred to Mesilla for a hanging trial. Don't miss that Morrison's arguing for Billy's pardon had nothing to do with Brushy's pardon request unless he was Billy, which he wasn't. Paraphrasing Billy's letter of December 12, 1880, to Lew Wallace yields claims that in November of 1880, a posseman named James Carlisle cornered the kid and his men at the Great House Ranch and was killed by friendly fire trying to escape, and the next day his men burned down the ranch thinking Billy was still inside. Wrong. Billy had escaped the day before. The burning was for revenge. Then Billy steals cattle from Chisholm for unpaid Lincoln County war wages. This is lifted from a Lew Wallace Outlaw Myth article. So Chisholm, Charles Goodnight, not part of that history, and Captain J.C. Lee made Pat Garrett sheriff. This is made up because the Secret Service reports explaining Garrett's role were unknown. So Garrett got a Texas posse, with source cited as a 1926 letter by posseman Jim East, which killed Tom O'Folliard, then killed Charles Bowdry at, quote, an old stone building. Note that Morrison didn't know its Stinking Springs name. And Billy and others were captured. At the Maxwell house, Mrs. Maxwell asks for Billy to say farewell to her daughter Paulita. That came from that 1926 Jim East letter, quoted in full as its source, but with Morrison missing its implication of Paulita as Billy's sweetheart. So he made up Celso Gutierrez for Brushy to use as Billy's sweetheart. At that meeting, the Indian servant gives Billy her scarf in exchange for his tintype. Morrison lifted this fiction from not cited Walter Noble Burns' 1926 book, The Saga of Billy the Kid. 3 of Billy's Santa Fe jail pardon plea letters to Lew Wallace are quoted in full. For the Mesilla trial, Billy's April 15, 1881 letter to Edgar Capeless is used as the source and quoted in full to say the federal charge was thrown out. Since that letter omitted the grounds for quashing, Morrison double-talked it as, quote, plea to the jurisdiction of the court. In fact, it was quashed on a technicality that Buckshot Roberts' killing site of Blazer's Mill was private property, thus, under territorial law, making the federal indictment incorrect. Then Billy is convicted and sentenced to hang for William Brady's murder. Billy is transported to Lincoln by named guards, lifted from an unsighted April 17, 1881, Newman's semi-weekly newspaper article, and incarcerated in the Murphy Store building, with Morrison unaware of its nickname, the House, or its being the new Lincoln County Courthouse and Jail. Billy's guards are Bell and Ollinger. Billy's escape occurs on April 28, 1881, with no description at all. Note this lack of intimate information expected of real Billy. Billy ends up in Fort Sumner, and the Brushy hoax's fictional death scene is given. Morrison wrote, "The kid ran upon Sheriff Garrett and the posse at the Maxwell house on the night of July 14, 1881, and a battle ensued between the kid and Garrett's deputies in the rear yard of Maxwell's house." Close quote. Note that Garrett had no posse, just deputies Poe and McKinney. The ambush killing by Garrett was in Maxwell's bedroom, and no one in town heard this supposed gun battle. As discussed in Talk 50, this fake back-of-the-house scene came from Sonishin's shoddy research used to coach Brushy. Importantly, in the pardon hearing, Brushy forgot these lines and gave the conventional shooting in Peter Maxwell's bedroom with his fictional friend Billy Barlow as victim. Morrison continued, "The kid was wounded several times in the moonlit yard." Note moonlight. It eventually emerged as a fix-up because Brushy made up a dark night. While Garrett and his men were in the house of Maxwell, he sustained a wound across the top of his forehead and fell back into a Mexican woman's house at the rear of the yard. Note that ignorance about Fort Sumner's buildings being around a parade ground yielded location errors. The Mexican woman proceeded to dress the wounds. Celsa Gutierrez, sister-in-law of Pat Garrett and sweetheart of the kid. Note Morrison's fatal Celsa sweetheart error as parroted by Brushy in his recording. Came running to inform the Mexican that Billy's partner had been killed on the back porch of Maxwell's, and they were passing off his body as that of the kid. Celso Gutierrez urged the kid to leave for the sheep ranch. Note this made-up ranch was dropped in the later hoax. She stated that they were going to kill the kid if they could find him. She further stated that Garrett and his two deputies were in the Maxwell house and would remain there until morning as they were afraid of being mobbed. This was lifted from not cited John W. Poe's 1933 book, The Death of Billy the Kid, while hiding that the feared mobbing was because popular Billy had been killed, and the townspeople were holding a wake that night for his obviously identified body. The kid insisted upon going after Garrett, a claim later dropped in the hoax, but they persuaded him to return to the sheep ranch before morning. About August 1st, the kid left for Old Mexico. Given were Brushy's confabulated adventures about living in Old Mexico and Texas under aliases. Morrison continued, During a cattle drive to Kansas in the late 1800s, he was arrested in the stockyards, suspected of being Billy the Kid. Having furnished a satisfactory alibi, he was released. This was the only time since his escape from the Lincoln County Jail, 1881, that he has been arrested. This fiction was abandoned in the later hoax. The second part of Morrison's statement of facts was faking no coroner's jury report. He wrote, "Historical facts and legend indicate that William H. Bonney, alias Billy the Kid, was killed by Pat Garrett in the Maxwell house that night in Fort Sumner, San Miguel County, New Mexico, and that a coroner's verdict was rendered, none of which facts nor legend have been supported by competent evidence. No mention of a purported coroner's verdict in the death of William H. Bonney has been made, except by Pat Garrett, a party of interest in attempting to collect reward offered by Governor Wallace. This is a lie. The said purported original coroner's verdict has not been produced, nor is a certified copy available. See Talk 36, link below, for the creation, filing, and subsequent finding of the coroner's jury report in Santa Fe. Therefore, said facts and legend are improper and untrue. It has been reported by the county clerks of San Miguel and Baca counties that no such purported coroner's verdict is a matter of record in their respective jurisdictions. That was because it was filed in Santa Fe, not with them in Las Vegas, as Morrison knew. The Secretary of State, Santa Fe, New Mexico, reported that the records failed to disclose the death record or coroner's report. Note that it was never filed in that office. It is also stated that the executive records disclose a copy of the application by Patrick F. Garrett for the claim on the reward money, which was offered, and upon said application, the reward was suspended. Note that this is Morrison's scam that Acting Governor William Rich's July 21st, 1881 Executive Records Book entry on suspending rewarding meant he denied it, when it meant he delayed paying until the territorial legislature converted Lew Wallace's private reward to a territorial one, which it did on February 18, 1882. Missing irony, Morrison added, none of Billy's indictments can be located. They are missing from the case files. Morrison missed that his coroner's jury report scam was based on no records found, meaning no event happened. And in his flurry of errors, lying, and name-dropping, Morrison forgot to say why any of this made Brushy Billy the Kid, or why he, as Billy, deserved the pardon. The 22 instruments for reference are copies of Billy Bonney's letters and documents, Governor Lew Wallace's documents, New Mexico clerk's letters about having no coroner's jury report, records about Pat Garrett's reward collection, and 2 affidavits by non-historical people claiming Brushy was Billy. Note that they are debunked in later talks about the hoax book, alias Billy the Kid. No attempt is made to connect Brushy to the documents. The last item merely confirmed that, as governor, Mabry could legally pardon Brushy. The items were 1. Governor Lew Wallace's amnesty proclamation. 2. Billy's pardon bargain letters with Lew Wallace's interview of him. 3. Billy's changed venue from Lincoln County to Doña Ana County. 4. The jury panel for Billy's trial for the William Brady killing. 5. Judge Warren Bristol's instructions to the jury for the Brady case. 6. Billy's first-degree murder verdict in the Brady case. 7. Billy's death sentence for the Brady case. 8. Dismissal of the case against Billy for the George Hinman killing. 9. Billy's death warrant. 10. That death warrant returned by Sheriff Pat Garrett after Billy's jailbreak. 11. Letter from Jim East about Billy's post-capture meeting with the Maxwell family. 12. Letter from Walter Noble Burns. 13. Letter from Billy to Edgar Capeless about the throwing out of his federal indictment. 14. Morrison's October 8, 1949 request to the Debaca County clerk in Fort Sumner requesting the coroner's jury report with answer denying its possession. 15. The October 31, 1949 response from the Las Vegas Deputy District Court clerk denying possession of the coroner's jury report. 16 and 17, November 9th and 21st, 1949 letters from Alicia Romero, Secretary of State, to Morrison denying possession of the coroner's jury report and stating that Garrett's reward application had been suspended. 18, affidavit from Martial Abel, dated August 1st, 1950, claiming Brushy was Billy the Kid. 19, affidavit from Severo Gallegos, dated November 11th, 1950, claiming Brushy was Billy the Kid. 20, Billy's March 13, 1879 letter to Lew Wallace. 21, letter from William E. Brady, grandson of Sheriff William Brady. 22, letter from the Attorney General of New Mexico confirming that the governor of New Mexico had the power to grant Brushy a pardon. As is obvious, Morrison's secret evidence packet had zero evidence that Brushy was Billy. A mountain of Billy the Kid documents didn't make him Billy. A pardon deserved by Billy didn't make Brushy deserve one. And not finding the coroner's jury report filed in Santa Fe by looking for it in Las Vegas didn't prove its non-existence. But spectacularly, in that hearing, Lucky Morrison escaped the evidence packet's actual review and certain ridicule by a legal expert like Governor T.J. Mabry, by the historical experts present, and by the reporters poised to broadcast nationally the laughable scam. Coupled with Brushy's own flop, the hoax's annihilation would have occurred that November 30th, 1950. Instead, Morrison was left free to fake a better Brushy and to pretend that his ironclad proof of Brushy's being Billy the Kid had been covered up. The talks to follow will trace William V. Morrison's and C.L. Sonishin's evolving Brushy Bill imposter hoax as they fabricated their better Brushy to star in their future hoax-backing book, Alias Billy the Kid.